and reps whom we are having today. I want to also take cognizance of the affirmative action through nominations, which have really unlocked the potential of so many women who would have otherwise not have been noticed by anybody. So I want to plead with this House that we pass this bill, that we support the women of this country, that we bring them on board in as far as policy and decision making is concerned, that we give power to the people living with the disability. And Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, I also want to talk about the Political Parties Act. And as it is, Mr. Speaker, sir, the political parties are the biggest impediment and actually roadblock to the election of women and special interest groups. And the way this is happening is because political parties have been taken hostage by the male dominance in politics. And Mr. Speaker, sir, by making sure that political parties or people living with disabilities, for women and for special interest groups. And Mr. Speaker, I won't name it in the floor of the House, but in political parties rallies, I will name them and will shame them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No, honourable members, I think I know this bill could easily cause a lot of excitement. But this bill is titled Representation of Special Interest Groups. Laws Amendment Bill.
That Parliament shall enact legislation to promote the representation in Parliament of women, persons with disability, youth, ethnic and other minorities, and marginalized communities. No, from the behavior of Honorable Commander, I don't think we can add elders. Bro, unless another elder, unless another elder will convince me. But Mr. Speaker, and the committee has looked at this thing. You know, when I listen to Honorable Sarah Korere, Mr. Speaker, I am shocked. Honorable Sarah Korere is a beneficiary of URP in 2013 through a nomination by the party leader then. So today, through that nomination, she became a very active member of the 11th Parliament, and she won her seat. She won her seat. So all the women, majority of the women who are in this House, Honorable Millie Odhiambo, let me finish. Honorable Millie Odhiambo, Mr. Speaker.
No, if you know, Honorable Junet, you've already shouted that asked which party leader.
No, the party leader.
That cannot be a point of order.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, for information, the party leader of URP then was none other than the Deputy President. Honorable Millie Odhiambo was also nominated. She did very well. She now a constituency member of Parliament. She got courtesy of ODM, then I was a member of the party leader. Honorable Sophia Abdi, in 2007, ODM, through the party leader, nominated her. Today, she's a sitting member. There is no way you can come and, castigate the party leaders that brought you to this House. And Mr. Speaker, there are many here. And Wangari of Naivasha, through UDF, of Gilgil. I will name and name. In fact, 50% of the women sitting in the House who have elected their seats. Look at even in the Senate, Honorable Lesuda was nominated by TNA. Honorable Fatuma Dulo, the senator. So I want to tell the women in this House, you cannot castigate the hand that fed you, brought you to politics. The hand that made you a politician today. So Sarah Korere, I know your history, we are very good friends, we're in URP, you're a serious leader. You need to, when you go to church on Sunday, you need to repent on that statement. Because your leader, your party leader now, we are preparing you for another. So Mr. Speaker, this bill is very good, and I really want the House to finish very fast.
Leader Majority, let's hear the point of order from Honorable Sarah Korere.
Speaker, is the majority leader in order to mislead this House that is giving me directions to go to church and repent. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to remind the majority leader, because he seems to suffer from some selective memory, something, amnesia, that the president, His Excellency, the president of this nation, was actually nominated by His Excellency, the second president of this nation. I don't know why he's only mentioning the women. And plus, Mr. Speaker, the leader of majority cannot purport to say that the women in this house have been made by nominations. We worked for those parties. I don't know why he chose to forget that we worked for the parties to get nominations.
Well, I think that's a point of argument.
No,
but,
yes.
but you made your point.
No, Mr. Speaker, you know, I don't want to go into the minutes of, because I was a deputy party leader of URP then. I don't want to go into the minutes of how we have nominated Sarah Correa and many others. And you know, I know that I can share, I can even table the minutes. There was a lot of competition. Yes. Yeah, and you know, and the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you know, Honorable Junet, as long as the Kibra by-election is still on, anything he says, I'll forgive him. As long as, anything he says, he cannot be charged in a court of law, because he's under siege in Kibra. Mr. Speaker, so, leaving aside my great, you know why I said Sunday? It's because if it was a Muslim, at 4 o'clock I'm going to pray, but for them they have to go all the way up to Sunday. Mr. Speaker, so this is a very important bill. Let us not lose the focus. We grappled with the two-gender bill from the 10th Parliament. Honorable Mother Karua was the Minister for Justice. It couldn't move anywhere. Now let us pass this bill so that the youth can have a place, the women can have a place, the marginalized can have a place. We can have a newbie. Speaker, the newbie in Kibra can have a member of parliament if we pass this law. The El Molo in Marsabit can have a member of parliament if we pass it. It is for this house to define the interpretation under IBC of what is a special group. Number two, we need to look at Section 4 in order to include among the functions of the commission the preparation of voters' register. Mr. Speaker, there is a talk everywhere that political parties, appoint their girlfriends, their boyfriends. Mr. Speaker, there is no world without a boyfriend or a girlfriend. There is no world. Yeah, don't cheat. Let's not cheat ourselves. There is no woman who doesn't have a boyfriend, very few. There is no man who doesn't have a girlfriend. So we are being told the political parties, quotes unquote, they are using their boyfriends and girlfriends. Where is it? Is it a crime if you favor your girlfriend to come to the house? Unless you change the law. Unless you change the law and you define it. You define it and you say that you are next of kin. Whether it is through blood or through something, we must put it here. We must put it in law that you cannot appoint your girlfriend to this special seat. So this is a very good law, interpretation. And even boyfriends, even the boyfriends. But there are no party leaders, there are no women party leaders. So I don't think where the boyfriends here. And Mr. Speaker, then we go to the Political Parties Act. What do we amend? Because in the IPC, in the interpretation, we must define. Also under IPC, we must give the power to prepare the party list for nomination. This may be through a process decided in the regulation. So let us decide how does IPC must find and do a vetting on the party list. Is the person being presented a relative of Honorable Duale? That must be put in the regulations. Otherwise, if we don't do it, then if I bring my relative, there's no crime I've committed. So we have an opportunity to put in the regulations. In the Political Parties Act, Mr. Speaker, we need to amend Section 2 on interpretation to define who are the ethnic minorities as a group that is not dominant in a given society, including racial minorities. Like Honorable Junet in Migori, he is an ethnic minority. Within the context of the, if they want to elect from the president to the MCA women, so be it. If they want to elect men, they have their own reasons. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is good. We need to define who are special interest groups. We need to define who are people with a disability. We need to define.
I'm the one to, when somebody on this side has spoken, we go to the other side. You see, the member for Migori East, Town East is no, but it is also important, all our members. I want us, just relax. All our members, relax when you are debating this bill. I know maybe emotions could run high, but it all depends on the language we choose to use. There is nothing wrong, of course. Member for Migori County, relax. What is being debated, I've already explained that this bill seeks to implement Article 100. And it is good to know that this country, by adopting the current constitution and the electoral method that it gave itself, the people of Kenya chose an electoral system called first past the post, in which you cannot guarantee results before the race is over. You cannot guarantee the results before the race is over. First past the post, everybody for himself and God for us all. So, honorable member for Migori, just relax. Take a copy of the bill, go through it, so that I know you have ideas you would want to assist the House with on this matter. But remember, Article 100, as I said, is to Parliament to enact legislation to provide for representation in Parliament. And I want members to distinguish states. This is to provide for representation in Parliament, not in other places. Distinguish this from 27. That the state is required to use measures, affirmative, legislative, to ensure that not more than 2/3 of either gender are represented in appointive and elective bodies. Those are bodies. We are dealing here specifically with Parliament. I think it is important that we appreciate this. Honorable Junet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this matter. Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank the committee for this important bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill dismisses that myth that we have lived with for the last 7 years, that if we don't pass the 2/3 gender bill, Parliament will be dissolved. Mr. Speaker, I have been organizing and very quiet on that matter, that somebody will move to the Supreme Court and dissolve the Parliament of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that was a lie. And I don't know how that lie gained that kind of momentum, Mr. Speaker, in all over the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 27(8) says that, let me read for the members to hear. Mr. Speaker, it says, in addition to the measures contemplated in Clause 6, the state shall take legislation and other measures to implement the principle that not more than 2/3 of the members of elective or appointive bodies shall be the same gender. Mr. Speaker, we are not the state here. We are Parliament, we are legislature. The state has 3 arms: judiciary, legislature, and the executive, Mr. Speaker. We can only legislate for the legislature to implement that gender 2/3. And if you look at Schedule 5, Mr. Speaker, of the Constitution, there is nowhere that says we must legislate or we must bring a bill for 2/3 gender, Mr. Speaker. There is nowhere. Mr. Speaker, what we are implementing is the Article 100, which schedule
of supporting or encouraging a given group of people to do something, then all of a sudden everybody becomes a special interest group. And therefore, this law or this amendment must be clear enough to tell us who exactly are we talking to about the special interest groups. When we are talking of minorities, I am here to say, for example, I had an example of my beloved MP for Suna East being mentioned as an example of a minority group in Migori. I think some of these definitions are misinformed, because if I was to give you the statistics of Migori County and the community where I comes from, the numbers that are residing in that county, then you'll dismiss that they are not really a minority. I have, over the years, learned that some of these wordings we use, minority, disadvantaged, special interest groups, they are never clear, and therefore they have been subjected to a lot of abuse, and any other person can wake up, coin some story and claim that they are disadvantaged or marginalized in one way or another. I am here to submit to the House that even in those communities which are considered majority, there are still cases where somebody is really disadvantaged. For example, we have had cases where leaders are not elected just because they don't have the financial muscle to mobilize the masses and sometimes even give out some things to make people vote them in. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would wish that even as we propose the amendment of this bill, or the enactment of this bill to interpret the operationalization of the Article 100 of our Constitution, these definitions need to be very clear. We are here as women, and we know, even as we stand here, we are not crying like babies, like though women are so incapable. We know we are very capable, but we have had a very patriarchal kind of state where elections and things that go with it are so violent, so male-oriented, and this is why most of the time women, being people who want to do things in honorable way and in a disciplined manner, in a righteous manner, sometimes we have debated and said we need a special regulations, policies, and frameworks that can actually support the election.
That the rights that are being implemented here are not practical in any other country. Whereby, Mr. Speaker, the people who are involved, for example, with the capital offenses, are treated with the easiest of care by our judicial system. And, Mr. Speaker, if you remember people who are even in drug lords, if you are caught up dealing drugs in many countries in Europe or in the US, you stay in jail until the case is completed. But in Kenya, you go and even murder, even if you are a serial killer, whatever it is, you walk to a judge, they treat you very nicely, and you get a bail. And in places where you are talking about rights, there are limits. If you are living in a country where terrorists are making life difficult for very many of us, 3 days ago we had a problem where our even GSU officers, they just go within our borders. They are blown up, 10 of them die. But if you catch the guy who is coming to blow them up, you take him to court, you hear a judge being very nice to the fella. In the evening he is out on bail, maybe 100,000 or 200,000. These are things that are not supposed to be in any constitution. Now that they're in our constitution, Mr. Speaker, we will ask the CIOC also to do something about it, the way they are trying to address this story of the marginalization. And it is a word which has been misused over the years. If you are marginalized, and it is not cultural, or the ones that were defined by the Constitution, the one Mr. Speaker read, it is wise, Mr. Speaker, to have those things that are used as an excuse to get access to privileges that you would not get or that you are getting when you are not entitled to them. I will give an example. If you go to the US Congress, it has 435 members. The Senate has 100. Total is 535. There is not even one which is reserved for those special interest things or agenda. People need to compete, and they compete equally. The only thing that we need to do, Mr. Speaker, is to look for those areas of legislation that need to be put together if the barriers are there. But I know even before, and even now, we have no barrier in our laws that bars somebody not to run in a specific area because it's a woman. You can give credit to places like Ukambani or even Central and the Rift Valley, where women stand and they can run and win. Those are examples, and they should be encouraged and evolve. That's how cultures evolve. You cannot legislate them. We have created a bad document. We have a problem with it, and it is the NGO and the activists who did it. And it is good now we are correcting it. I know in places like Meru we had a problem over the years, such that it's difficult for somebody to be elected, or even a place like Kisii or the Somali or other northern communities. But those things, you don't legislate them. People, when they go to the polls, they elect a leader, and the matter should end there. You don't put those encumbrances that after 20 years or after 10 years, you will stop this gender thing. Yes, why are you putting it in the first place? And then we are talking about non-discrimination. If you are not discriminating in one part of the Constitution, you go and turn into another part of it, it is causing discrimination. That's why I thank the committee for trying to harmonize our Constitution so that we don't have those areas that are not created by legislation. There are no barriers created by legislation. So the legislation should not create avenues that are likely to be abused. I remember when you were talking of Article 95, about the representation of the people. When you are elected as a member of a constituency, you are representing everybody there. You are representing the poverty, if there is poverty. You are representing the wealth. You are representing the animals that are there. And all the people are there, all their interests are represented by that member. Hata panya ile iko huko na rats na paka. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to understand. We need to understand that when you are doing a constitution, it is a document which can hold us together, not a document which can be used and abused by international NGOs that actually infiltrated on our constitution in 2010. We have nearly 10 years of living with it. We have seen where it is bad. It is time, Mr. Speaker, we went slowly by slowly and amending them. Specifically, the one I'm talking about, the Bill of Rights. That is where we were messed up. You go and appoint somebody, you hear somebody is in court, you don't have power to appoint. And yet,
women based on other consideration, I think that is very unfortunate. Yes, there could be some cases like that. But it is also wrong to scandalize all nominated members of parliament, including Korere, who was here in the 11th parliament as a nominated MP. And then she comes out to say that we base it on other considerations. I hear people sometimes say parties nominate girlfriends, I don't know whether boyfriends and girlfriends of leaders. But Mr. Speaker, in this House, in the National Assembly, I can speak for ODM. We have 3 nominated MPs here, and I know why we nominated each and every one of them, each one of them. There is a reason why we nominated Sosion, to represent the workers, and we were targeting the teachers. We wanted to show teachers that this is a party that accommodates teachers. And that is why we nominated Sosion, who is the SG, the Secretary General of NAT. We nominated Jacqueline Odu because this lady has been persistently and consistently promoting women agenda in the party of ODM. She has even sacrificed and used her own resources to promote gender issues and gone across the country to train our women. If you give such a person a slot, you forget all the other good qualities about her, including her education, and you only want to see her gender and other extraneous issues. We nominated Anita Gatti because she's a very strong lady who has been campaigning for ODM in a very difficult constituency, the Kuria region. And Danita Gatti, we know she would have not needed nomination, probably if she did not get involved in accident. So coming here to scandalize nomination of MPs, through nomination, that is why we have Millie Odhiambo here today in Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, I think we need to respect, there are also isolated cases of people who have not merited nomination, but we should not collectively say that those who are being nominated don't merit nomination. Some seriously merit nomination. I wish we had more slots. We would even nominate more. In fact, through nomination, you may be able to get some quality that voters may not give you in Parliament. Because voters, it's about who garners the highest number of votes. And voters sometimes vote for various reasons, some of which include who is attending most funerals in the constituencies, some of which is who is giving more money, some of which who is coming from the biggest clan in the constituency. But through nomination, you can identify some quality, someone who has competence, someone who can contribute to the debate in this House, as Jacqueline Oduola has been doing for ODM, as Danita Gani has been doing for us. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that I am not persuaded with the argument that one of the reasons why maybe these marginalized groups fail to win seats is because of financial capacity. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to advocate for proper and organized campaign and an agenda to the people. Let us not assume that our people don't consume information. They do. They consume information. But sometimes we bring candidates who cannot win just because they are women. You know, sometimes you bring a woman who cannot even get 200 votes. And just because she's a woman, she masquerades all over the place that she can win. I have seen even in my constituency. You bring someone who cannot even, the polling station where she's voting, herself and her husband, she gets 15 votes. That is not someone to bring around just because she's a woman. And then you scandalize and spoil the good name of women that women lose. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of money, I wanted to say if it was about money, in 2007 I would have not won my seat. I was campaigning against very wealthy individuals, moneyed people, but I defeated them because of the agenda I had. So let us focus, let us advise these marginalized groups to focus on the message that they give to the electorate, and they will find themselves elected. In a very short time, we may start crying as men that now we need affirmative action. See what is happening in our education system. The girls are overtaking boys. Yeah, but just the other day we were complaining. That same thing may happen here if we give these women support and the other marginalized groups. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Very well. I just want some whisper from the floor when you raise the issue of violence and insults. But you qualify that there is not a preserve of men. As you say that, there was some refrain, that some mantra that what a man can do, so I suspect maybe John Bandy, you needed to have heard that what a man can do, a woman can do better. Honorable Wanyonyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I also want to support this bill, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is a very important bill. It's an affirmative action bill, and it proposes to amend various legislations to actualize this, the realization of Article 100 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember very well when we had our induction in Mombasa as Kediba, the members of Parliament with Disability. And one of the things you told us, you challenged us about Article 100, that is the article that we need to look into that will bring out this affirmative action for people that are mentioned there, Mr. Speaker. Women, persons with disabilities, youth, ethnic and the minorities and marginalized groups, communities. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important bill. And having been out there, Mr. Speaker, I have campaigned the hard way. I know what it means. And people with disability are so disadvantaged. I know why women are still disadvantaged, Mr. Speaker, because of some cultural practices in various communities that do not allow women to participate in some activities. And with this legislation, Mr. Speaker, it will bring out, it will actually try to highlight, and is also being given, Mr. Speaker, that the political parties will provide funds, Mr. Speaker, for publicity, to try to help people, marginalized people, women and persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker. That's very important because
of women in terms of cultural issues, social economic activities, and the rest of those issues to enable us know which one really require special attention. A millionaire woman cannot be considered to be a special group, cannot be considered to be marginalized compared to a pauper man in the villages all over this country. It is important as a community that we give this discussion a sober debate to avoid situation where we legislate where it's not possible to implement. Honorable Speaker, I'm also at pain to understand why Persons with Disabilities Act 2003 is included in this matter. The object of Article 100 of the Constitution deals about Parliament and deals about election process, more or less to speak. Defining, including, or expanding the mandate of the Commission that deals with disabilities to include public decision-making bodies, it's beyond the mandate or the intention of the Constitution. So, Honorable Speaker, we need to look at those issues. However, Honorable Speaker, the bill might have very progressive views, but I just want to pick one or two issues that require serious interrogation. Clause 10 of the bill as presented to us today that seeks to amend Section 26(1) of the Political Parties Act of 2011 provides as follows: promoting the representation in Parliament and in the county assemblies of special groups through civic education, capacity building,
The idea of one-third gender principle is a principle we want, or is just for activists, as some members have said. I am happy to be one of those activists. But if the other members believe it is not, then they must have the courage and the people of Kenya to say we don't want that principle. But if we want the principle, then we must bite the bullet. We must have provisions similar to what we have at the counties, at the National Assembly, and at the Senate. But those are questions we can't answer in legislation. We must answer them in the Constitution. And I think the ideal time to answer them is in the context of the BBI initiative. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. My last contribution is in respect of Section 20. Section 20 requires a political party to give access to the media for these special interest groups. Mr. Speaker, first of all, it goes beyond the legislation. The legislation requires access to public media. This one does not restrict. So it's supposed that it includes private media. But Mr. Speaker, what business would the party have ensuring that a candidate I'm running against has access to the media, merely because they are women, they are youth, or they are from a minority? That is no business of the political party. So, Mr. Speaker, for all the good things that the bill has, I find it has very fundamental questions, which, unless properly answered, I find myself unable to support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, that is at least from a former member of the Committee of Experts. Is it defunct? Would we say the defunct Committee of Experts?
Committee of...
It's, but it's no longer there. It is functus. the former committee of experts. Very well, Honorable Tiende. Honorable Kato.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. and Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill. And actually, it has a lot of some issues that I'm sure the committee will clean up when it comes to that stage of committee stage. And Mr. Speaker, first of all, I really want to thank this committee for bringing this bill at this time, because it is good that the members of this House get to know that this is all about elections. And I think it will be good for them to take keen interest, because for those of us who have been in this House before, such things that pertain elections always come at the tail end of Parliament. And at that particular time, there is always this issue of campaigns, and very few members are always in the House to take interest. And then immediately when we go to the field, you realize that the laws that you have just passed, what we do, what we legislate is not going to act against us, because we will be the players as far as, or the end users of this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if members want to know that this is all about election, if you look at the statutes that are proposed for amendment by this bill, Election Offences Act, and therefore we should be very careful about it. The election campaign financing, which is an issue we are talking of, even voter bribery and the like. And this is what actually we would say, is it high time that political parties should really meet the campaign cost for members of this House and the other assemblies? The Election Act, the Political Parties Act, the IBC Act, then you are just left with the two, which is the National Gender and Equality Commission Act and the Person with Disabilities Act, that are not really substantive election acts. But Mr. Speaker, if you look at clause 2 of the bill, some issues there, like 2A, the issue of actually doing funding. And I think that is what Honorable Atiende Omolo spoke about, that why meet the cost of elections for only some certain groups of candidates. That's the special interest groups. If that has to be done, then using the political parties fund. And then we should do it for all candidates in all categories, which is not possible, so may not be practical. We need to do something on that. The next one is on B, 2B, still on campaign financing. And this financing is coming from the political parties fund. And I think we need to agree that do we even need to be contributing monthly payment to these political parties? You know, because as we speak now, all political parties are being funded partly by the members of those political parties. Do we need to do it, or we leave it for political parties to receive funds from the political party fund? I'm made to understand that of party membership is even optional. It's voluntary. That's what I hear. That even in the party, in my party, I hear there are members who don't do a check-off system monthly. It's voluntary. I don't know. But it is actually another way of bringing some unfairness when it comes to election time. Because you find sitting members, be it at the county level, at national level, some political parties don't clear them because they tell them, you have arrears, you have not paid your membership, your contribution for this long. So those things need to be agreed upon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on still clause 2E, when you look at what the bill says that the nominating bodies, the elective bodies, will ensure that their nomination lists comply with the provision of Article 54.2. But you see, 54.2 and is about the special interest group, that at least in every party list there should be 5% of people with a disability in that party list. But Article 54.2 of the Constitution says that is progressive. There will be progressive implementation of that article that deals with the of this committee that brought this bill need to check whether this will be in line with the Constitution, because the Constitution says the 5% requirement for people living with disabilities is progressive. And then when you go to Article 81B of the Constitution on the gender issue, I think that has been spoken about. But coming to the Section 7 of the Political Parties Act 2011, that is envisioned for amendment, the definition of a special interest group and the definition of ethnic and other minorities, I think as it is, the definition is fake, but you just need to do some cleaning, because what is bringing some issues here is the issue of a society, a given society. Because when it is said ethnic or minorities means a group that is not dominant in a given society, then you need to define, maybe probably we would like to see it's not dominant in a certain geographical area, like whether it is in a certain ward or in a certain constituency. I've seen actually people who have gone to court because, some individuals have been nominated under the group of minorities, and some voters or some interest groups thinks or thought they are not people of the minority group, and they have won the cases in court. So therefore, the definition of society need to be clarified. Mr. Speaker, when I think members need to check at clause 9, which is about amending section 25 of the party from special interest group in the preceding election year, the 5%. So that need to be looked into. Members need to be very clear, because if you go even to clause 2 of that section 9, it talks of, for a party must have at least 5 elected members of parliament, 1 elected governor, 12 elected members of the county assembly, and the like. And the issue of, because I can see my time is going, clause 30A, the issue of reporting to the registrar by a political party within 30 days on how the activities they have done on promoting the special interest group in parliament. I also want to say that clause 17 has been talked about.
Member for Kitui Central.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance also to add my voice into this interesting debate. And Honorable Speaker, I believe it will cause no harm to continue thanking the committee for this good work to make sure that Article 100 of our Constitution is implemented, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, former speakers have really said a lot of things about this bill, and I want to say that I'm supporting it, although from parties' funds, the money which is released for political parties. Looking at the relevant clause, Honorable Speaker, there is the issue of 53%, there is the issue of the 20% for other parties, there is the issue of 20% for the special interest groups, and then the amount is also tied to the number of members of parliament, governors, and MCRs. And I think, Honorable Speaker, this is an area I would request the chair of the committee to really do a bit of work in this area, because currently there is a bit of confusion, and the confusion arises more where there are coalitions. I'm just imagining a situation where the 20% for the other parties, what would happen if for that part, you find that it's only one party which qualifies based on the issue of the governor, the issue of the MCRs, and the issue of the MPs. Then you might find one party, which is not the majority and the minority, also getting a very huge share based on that particular legislation. The other issue, the issue of coalition, and what I have in mind is, like, if I take our example of our NASA coalition, where Wiper, which I belong to, is a member. Currently, Wiper, Fort Kenya, and Amani are not benefiting from this fund. And basically because you have not met the threshold in terms of governors, MPs, and MCRs. And what has happened is that because of that, there's an argument which has been pushed forward that we can't benefit from the allocation which goes to ODM, who is our bigger brother. And the question is whether ODM would have managed to get that threshold, or to achieve that threshold, if these other three partner parties were not participating in the election. And basically the answer is no. Because, for example, if you take our region, the southeastern region, and you look at the MPs who have come from that area, they are all purely Wiper members of parliament, implying that if Wiper was not participating in the election, more likely even the vote for the presidency would have gone to another particular individual and not ODM. So I think, to me, this is an area which is a gray area, and I think if it is not properly structured in terms of legislation, it can cause a lot of problems in the political parties. And since this law is to ensure that there is proper representation in parliament, then representation in parliament cannot be effective if political parties are also not effective. So this is an area I would urge the chairman really to make sure that whatever legislation we come up in this area, it is very clear. The other area is the area of divinations. And I like the proposal that we need to define. When you look at Article 100, there are those categories of people who are categorized as special interest groups. And it is very important that we get the divinations correctly. Because as Honorable Oundo was saying, when you talk about women in this country, there are some women who are economically empowered more than even the men in the country. And the question is, when you group them together, then what is the implication? My proposal would be, would it not be wise, even under the category women, that we come up with a categorization of which group would benefit, or which group of women would be categorized to be marginalized, that they would benefit from nominations or this special treatment when it comes to elections. Otherwise, then you'll find that this advantage, people can take advantage of this, and more so, our sisters can take advantage of this grouping of all women, and you find that even that special group you are targeting will never then realize the dream of being this house because of that grouping together. And the other area is also the marginalized areas. You know, the word marginalized area, or marginalized groups, all that. We also need to be very clear, although it is defined in the Constitution. I think then we must, even though it is defined in the Constitution, there will be no harm if we repeat it so that people don't take advantage of it. Because you have seen people who want to just take advantage of these general terminologies so that they benefit. The other area which of me is of interest is the area of Election Offences Act, the amendment you are proposing. And I'm happy with that amendment. Because in this country, politicians take advantage of elections, and they engage in a series of offenses to stop people from participating in a fair election. And I think we need to be very strict when it comes to the election offenses, so that if anybody is engaged in this kind of offense, then the penalties are so tough to a level that you might actually even be barred from contesting. And I think if we get that both for women and men, because I've realized the reason why most of our sisters don't participate in the election, anytime you engage in a discussion with them, they will tell you elections are very, very violent, and I can't participate in them. I don't want to die in the process. And I think we need to come up with really legislation which will make sure that nobody will say, I can't participate in an election because people will be violent. And to me, if we get that right, then we'll have more of our sisters coming to participate in an election, and that will stop us from thinking about really giving them these special seats where you want to nominate them. And I want really to congratulate our sisters from Ukambani, because we don't elect them because they're just our sisters. We elect them because they go that extra mile to campaign. And you can see our speaker there.
Madam Speaker, I was in the 11th Parliament. We were not able to pass this law. Now we are in the 12th Parliament. Madam Speaker, I want this House to be counted, this 12th Parliament, to be counted with the House that was able to achieve this particular provision, Madam Speaker, of passing a law that is going to implement Article 81 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, in the specific provisions, and I heard one of the members here, Honorable Otiende, talking about the fact that IBC, Madam Speaker, cannot be given additional responsibility of determining the nature of list. And Madam Speaker, if you look at section of this bill referred to by Honorable Otiende, because I think it is important to recover 17, section 17, if I'm not wrong. 17. It's important for members to note this, because it's very important. It says, Madam Speaker, every political party participating in an election shall, during party nomination, ensure that at least 1/3. Madam Speaker, the political parties are critical in the election process in our country. It is actually the institutions we use to cause the process of election in nominating members in their political parties. So, Madam Speaker, it is for this House to facilitate, so that, Madam Speaker, if a political party is mandated in law to ensure that during nomination, not during the election, it is during the nomination process, ensure that 1/3 of a nominee for parliamentary and county assembly elections are of either gender. That's the process beginning from there, Madam Speaker. So that out of the number of the nominated members, they are already, we are able at least to ensure that we have, members of one gender, 1/3 of that nominees being not from one gender. So, Madam Speaker, I think we want to look at this in terms of that we are enabling as a House. We are passing legislations, enabling institutions of governance in our country, Madam Speaker, whether through the IBC, to ensure that we facilitate this. And so I want to really support even that particular section 17 in terms of enabling. And then 5% of the nominees for parliamentary and county assembly elections are persons with disabilities. And Madam Speaker, if you look at the gender issue, the disability, person with disability is actually in Article 100, that is B, youth, ethnic, and marginalized groups, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I just want to support that particular issue. Madam Speaker, if you go to section of the bill, that is section 4. Section 2.1 of the IBC Act be amended by inserting the following definitions. Special interest groups means the following groups. Of course, again, reproduction of what is in Article 100. And when it comes, Madam Speaker, to the issue of, that is 5, section 4 of the IBC in paragraph A, by inserting the word and of the data and the voters' roll on basis of all categories of special interest groups. Madam Speaker, how then do we, for example, be able to isolate these special groups, whether marginalized groups, people with disabilities, in a place like Baringo, Madam Speaker, where we have a very small group called El Chamus in our whole county of over 700,000 people, and we have a population living in one ward. How do you assist that group, Madam Speaker, to achieve? It is only by putting legislation. Otherwise, that particular group, Madam Speaker, or the Sengweris in Elgeyo Marakwet, or the people who live in Nakuru, the so-called, I've forgotten some small group in Nakuru County. So, Madam Speaker, I think when we talk about this House, we have the powers. We have the constitutional responsibility, Madam Speaker, to ensure that we pass a legislation that will enable implementation of Article 81, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to agree with members that indeed the nomination of members to this House sometimes, Madam Speaker, has been misused. Madam Speaker, because, and I would like to also appreciate those who have come out, like yourself, Madam Speaker, said by one of the members in this House that you have been able to rightly, through your own efforts, to come to the House twice. But, Madam Speaker, that is in the combination. There are other areas, Madam Speaker, where the society, the value system, the cultures don't allow women perhaps to take elective positions. And this is the only way, Madam, we are going to ensure that those kind of societies are actually enabled, Madam Speaker, so that we have a representation from all groups of the women, especially in a place like where I come from. So, Madam,
you support. Very well, very well. Let me have the member for Hemuaya, the Honorable Milemba Omboko.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this chance to make a comment on this very good bill, and also thank the chair and the committee for having been advantage of sometimes giving the person who wins being the winner, yet he has a very small margin as compared to the people who are opposing him, especially in cases, Madam Speaker, where we have many candidates or other factors that do influence elections. And therefore, it's important that affirmative action be taken to actually bring to bear those who are marginalized. I also want to thank the definitions that were given of the marginalized groups, because the chair of this committee and the committee members, we risk also getting to a situation whereby we rush, or people will rush to be included on the list of the marginalized people and who are not marginalized, and therefore to benefit unfairly from a list that they should not be there. But good luck, the Speaker did direct that the definition of the marginalized is actually found in the Constitution in its section 260. And actually, it is ring-fenced. The language used there does not include a matter of adding other people, but they are really defined from a perspective of where they come from, how they have been living, their culture, their ways of life, and even economic status, for instance, the hunter-gatherers that we have in this country. But then my contribution would be that as we do this, we need to look at certain contradictions that may lead to us favoring a group against other. One of such an area would be the election campaigns financing. We really must tackle that as a House, not just the committee alone, because when we actually get out to finance the marginalized and using political parties, yes, one way of enhancing their participation in democracy would be financing. But to what level? That level must really be also defined, if we have to define it in law. Because the urge of a political party is not usually to give you a balance of the law, that these are the marginalized, these are the women, these are the youths. But an election party, Honorable Speaker, goes to an election with the intention of winning. And they want to win, get more seats, whether there are what percent of this, that, and that in respect of this particular law. And therefore, we have to look at that with the committee very clearly to see how shall we mitigate that vis-a-vis the interests of politics. The history of marginalization in Kenya and in its perspective of representation during the colonial period was because the Africans were not represented in parliament because they were not allowed to vote in the earlier stages. So the earliest attempt to include them then became a form of a nomination. And I think that's how Eliud Matthew comes in this house. And then later on is expanded slowly. So I would also wish the chair, as they retreat back even today, to look at how we shall combine the issue of nomination or inclusion of the marginalized group vis-a-vis a competitive election in this country that is also in law under the fact that we are actually following the universal suffrage as a way of electing our people into parliament. And not only the committee, but all ourselves should be able to look at that. Because in so doing, then we can again favor certain political parties, possibly that come from areas, Honorable Speaker, like I've been told, with due respect, like where you come from in Ukambani, they tend to have respect and have respected elections of ladies and women. But look at Western, for instance. Let me just give this one because it will really benefit this house.
We really fight.
Thank you. In Western, for instance, if I look at the entire Bungoma since inception, 1963 and even way below, come to Kakamega environs, come to Vihiga, and that's why I want to congratulate the Rift Valley. They have never elected a woman representative in this house. Thanks to Busia that gave us a few ladies like Ojiambo and so on and so forth. So as we mitigate that particular area, it will be very important that we see how this financing will also go against the cultures and the beliefs of people. I'm not meaning that there are certain people who don't believe in, it's a cultural practice, but I had to bring out that one in a more clear way as possibly I have done. Honorable Speaker, I would wish to make some comment on the issue of how the law proposes to distribute funds to political parties. The law says that we shall give 50%, I hope I'm correct, 50% of the funds to the two largest political parties. I think, with due respect, Chair and the committee, you are influenced by the circumstances of the time that we have two largest political parties or two largest political coalitions. But this may not be the case forever. So the definition of the word largest is in infinity itself. How shall we actually define properly quantitatively the word largest party or largest coalition? We have to redefine it based on what it will have achieved, this political party, and not just the word largest. It is fairly simplistic, fairly so easy, casual. So we have to define it in perspective of how many seats it has or what percentage of the voters, Honorable Speaker, this political party would have achieved to actually benefit 50% and possibly also tackle the issue. Do they then deserve that lion's share? Because we are talking about first past the post, and we may have a situation whereby the two largest political parties are controlling only a majority that is less than or just about a third of the votes in Kenya. That can arise, and I'm happy. The chair of this particular committee is a lawyer, and therefore I thought I should bring that out, and then goes down to split. I am brave enough to think that apart from the question of women per se, because women are very strong people in the society, especially from where I come from. Among the Banyore and Maragoli community, without women, Honorable Speaker, I can see my time is almost through. I therefore beg to support, but we'll be moving several amendments, and we help each other to make the law stronger. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Member for Mwaya, your amendments are welcome, of course, within the procedures of the House. Let me hear a lot about women. Let me hear about from the member for Kisumu County, whether women are given free or they fight for it. Where I come from, and thank you for raising my name, I fought for the position. Honorable member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the onset, as I support this bill, I'd like to state that
we have been able to, as Parliament, put in place pieces of legislation that have made this constitution a robust constitution that we wanted it to be. But the issue of representation of gender, Madam Speaker, has been a sore issue. And I want to congratulate the committee under the leadership, able leadership of Chairman Honorable Kioni, for the work that they have done in seeking to remedy this very sore issue that has been
discriminative in favor of an identified group. Now, if we then look at those three issues, then we will find it easy to deal with this. But as I said, some of them cannot be dealt with in the bill. We will have to go back to the Constitution. Like two-thirds or one-third, whichever, we shall never achieve it because it is a number. And you want to get it through an electoral process, you must put an administrative process like in Article 177 for the county assemblies. So you find that everywhere. If leaving those three issues alone or taking them into consideration, I think I support this bill. It has made a lot of effort. But there are a few things I'll point out. Like if you look at clause 5, when it is saying you will have disaggregated data on the voters' roll on the basis of all categories of special interest groups. What I wondered, are we going to look at our voters' roll and say, these are women, these are people with disability, this number? Of what use is that? Because they are not going to vote for themselves, but now they're voters like everybody else. So I thought that one is something that probably we need there. Again, but under the same section, actually there are parts that I like D, which says communication modes accessible to persons with disabilities immediately after. Yeah, that is important because there are persons with disability that if you put out material in one format, they cannot. So you may need Braille, you may need sign language, you may need talking machines. So I think that is extremely important. The same also goes into section 8.2, which again it says things must be published in a manner accessible to persons with disabilities. However, in 8A, again you get the same problem that you are saying that in the website you might put in such a manner and form that's accessible to all persons, including special interest groups. If you put all persons, including special interest groups, then the issue of disability disappears. And actually now you are saying you are including women there. Again, there is nothing special in publishing material in a way that is accessible to women because they don't have the physical disabilities. So I think those are the small areas that we look at. When it looks at the funding on Section 9, I think this was brought about by Section C, where 25% of the fund proportionate to political parties based on number of candidates of the party from special interest groups that have been elected. I think that is acceptable because this is possible. You are doing after the elections, so you can actually work out what proportion they are in that group. Madam Speaker, if you then look at, again, that same 9, and you are looking at 9.2a, political parties shall entitled to receive funding from the political parties fund, not more than 2,000 registered office bearers of the same gender. The office bearers are elected. Again, the parties will have a lot of difficulty ensuring that they are 2/3. And then you put the number of governors, the number of MCAs. All are elected persons. How are you going as a party to ensure that you have such numbers? Madam Speaker, if you go again to Elections Act 17, again you meet the same thing of numbers. 1/3 of its nominees for parliamentary and county assembly elections are of either gender. What nomination process are you going to use? If you use an elective process for nomination, again, you cannot get that number. So, Madam Speaker, I support this bill. It has done a lot of work, but it is suffering from defects that are arising from the Constitution itself. So I think what they can do for us, well, we have a process coming, and I think this particular committee can actually help this House to actually look through the Constitution and look at areas that we really need to correct so that we can put them there. I like the one on violence. Everybody has agreed. There is no doubt that when a violence is applied during elections, women get thoroughly disadvantaged. That is something we accept, and that bill, that bit, I support. Overall, Madam Speaker, I support this bill.
Very well. The Honorable Sophia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute to this very, very important bill. Madam Speaker, and I want first to thank the committee, and more so I want to thank the chair, Honorable Kioni. Honorable Kioni knows when we were doing the final touches on the Constitution, being one of the framers of this Constitution, we worked with him because we were members of that committee. We were 27 of us in that committee. And when we were putting this particular article in the Constitution, we knew what we were doing as a team, because we knew, and if the 27 of us will not come back to the House, then we'll have people who will make and who will implement and who will make a legislation that will be back up to the Constitution, that will be anchored to the Constitution. Madam Speaker, Article 100 of the Constitution requires enactment of a legislation to promote representation of women, persons with disability, youth, minorities, and marginalized communities in this country, Madam Speaker. According to the 5th schedule, Madam Speaker, of the legislation requires implementation of the Article 100 of the Constitution in order to promote the representation of the special interest group. And this was supposed to be enacted by 2015, Madam Speaker. And you look at the time frame that we have taken, because the Constitution has given us a time frame for every article that is in the Constitution. But we have taken this long, since 2025. That is the right time when we were supposed to have this piece of legislation. But because of people who did not understand the treatment that the Article 100 was treating, are the people who delayed and who opposed the enactment of this legislation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, one thing that I want to correct is Honorable KJ, when he was contributing, he said he's making reservation. And the reservation he's making particularly was the issue of who is going to be made a special, which constituency will be reserved for special interest groups, Madam Speaker. This is not saying that. This legislation is not saying that there will be a special constituency that will be reserved for special interest group, Madam Speaker. This is saying that there are special interest groups in this country who are not represented in this House, just the way the party is nominating 12 members to this House. This is also treating the problem that we're having with the minority groups, persons with disability, the women, youth, so that we have adequate representation of these interest groups, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this legislation, it is not saying that we will reserve the Koroiti constituency for either a woman or a person with disability. That is not what the legislation is saying. So when you have reservation on the legislation because you fear your constituency will be reserved for either a woman or will be given to a person with disability, then you have not gone through this legislation properly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when the committee, particularly this committee, when they are amending Persons with Disability Act of 2003, and they're saying promotion of persons with disability for inclusion in decision-making body. I don't see the council they can promote through civic education. They can sensitize the community. They can mobilize the people. And that is what we want to see in the legislation, so that they can promote properly and they can have it, Madam Speaker. The other thing that I like about is when they are saying that we need to put in place a communication system for persons with disability, particularly hearing and visual, so that we have proper communication systems within the election system, so that these can encourage and can promote participation of persons with disability, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and in the amendment of the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, Madam Speaker, of 2011, Madam Speaker, the interest groups are well defined already in the Constitution, Madam Speaker. In Article 100, it has already defined. And why do we need to redefine it? Because if we give another body to redefine it, they may use their own language. But already, the Constitution is the supreme law of this country. It has given clear definition. Who are these people? Women, persons with disability, youth, minorities, minority communities. This is what it is saying, Madam Speaker. So we need also the committee to relook at that. The proposal that requires voter education, this is perfect and it is in order. For people to participate properly, there need be a lot of civic education to be conducted, Madam Speaker, so that people can be reached through social medias, through mainstream media, Madam Speaker, and through public participation. Madam Speaker, public participation is a key principle in our Constitution. And it says we must give the people a chance to contribute to anything that surrounds within their lives and their livelihoods, Madam Speaker, and the decision that is going to be made within political arenas, Madam Speaker. And public participation is key. So, Madam Speaker, I agree with the committee when they're putting the civic education in terms of amending the IEBC laws, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other important thing is political parties. Political parties, Madam Speaker, it is the small animal that messes up the election process in this country. Because political parties are owned by people. They are owned by individuals who have the capacity, who have resources, and who can manipulate the way they want, Madam Speaker, in trying to, when they're doing the party nomination. We have seen the problems women have gone through in political parties nominations. We have seen what happened. We know the kind of calibers of women who are qualified, who are expert, who are on top of everything. But when it comes to political party nominations, then that is when they get challenged, Madam Speaker. So we are saying we need to have tough law in political parties so that we can create an enabling environment for women within those political parties. If we do not have laws that will, be strong enough, that will promote the interests of women within those political parties, then it is going to be a problem. Because some of us missed our nomination from our political parties. We had to use small parties, Madam Speaker, at the end of the day. Very small parties that were created from 4 weeks. My political party was 2 months old. when I joined. 2 months old. So what I'm saying is, women are disadvantaged at all levels at the political party, Madam Speaker, and I'm asking my good brother, whom we have worked together in the 10th Parliament, and we have done a lot in terms of, advancing the interests of women in this country. I'm asking him to relook, and I'm going to do my own research so that the time we are doing the finals, I may bring my amendment so that we can tighten up the political party issues, Madam Speaker, in this country, so that the political party will be able to have discipline, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other issue is the issue of an election campaigning finance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, people have different capacities of financing. We must have a platform which is competitive, which everybody, have equal platform, that we can use resources that are limited, that are capped, that every political party or an individual can use with certain limits, Madam Speaker, so that, you have equal platform that you can now work together and you can compete on an equal platform, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on election offenses, the committee have done a good job. And I want to tell them thank you very much for, bringing this amendment, which is strong, which, can help in terms of, within the election offenses.
Your time is over, Honorable Member. I give the floor to the member for Machoge Borabo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity also to contribute to this amendment of implementation of Article 100 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, I want to begin by saying this is a very important step by the committee to bring us this kind of guidelines on how best this article can be implemented. Madam Speaker, I want also to say that the suggested amendments bring out opportunity for us to reflect on the realities on how this particular article can be implemented. Having listened to the honorable members, I will have the following comments to make. First of all, I'm very positive about the issues of discipline that the amendments will bring, and the responsibility that has been given to the parties to make sure that there is a good discipline maintained for the various candidates to be effectively allowed to participate in the elections. Madam Speaker, I want to say that I have a number of reservations. I want to start my reservations from what the committee has presented as special interest groups. When you look at the special interest groups, I find a disconnect. When you look at the Constitution, look at Article 95, Article 97, they talk of special interests. And here we are talking of special interest groups. That allows for a new dimension of divination. And in the special interest groups that have been identified, I see about 6 categories. We have women, we have persons with disability, we have youth, ethnic and other minorities, and we have marginalized communities. Now, the first question I want to give is when you look at the proposed section on Election Act number 17, I think this has been well put by the honorable members. How are you going to ensure that at the end of the day, from the 6 groups, from the 5 groups that have been identified as special interest groups, that they will be represented proportionally in this House? What about a situation? Because we are talking of an elective process that will be used for nomination. What of a situation where you find consistently only women are going to be nominated when the parties put the proper mechanism in place? What about a situation where you may have women and youth are being nominated consistently? So that the 2/3 of the nominees through an elective process from the 5 groups is a big dream. The same thing, the 5% of the nominees from those 5 groups is also a tall wish. So I want to say that perhaps we need a further thought on how to ensure that an elective process in nomination is able to pick those various groups to appear in this House. Madam Speaker, the other problem I have is the funding. I'm very happy that the political parties are being required to support special interest. What will be the criteria? And at what stage will these political parties begin to fund the special interest groups? Is it at the preliminaries? Is it after the preliminaries? I think these things need to be very clear. Otherwise, there stands a chance for the political parties to abuse these particular sections of the amendment. Madam Speaker, that is my contribution, but I support these amendments for giving us opportunity to engage and reflect on how it is difficult for us to implement Article 100 of our Constitution. Thank you.
Very well. The member for Samburu North.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I also want to contribute and support the bill, and of course, I want to thank the committee for coming up with this bill, which has really taken so long, because we should have done this a long time ago, maybe 1 year after the promulgation of the Constitution. But nevertheless, it's not too late. We will still go through it and also support it. But Madam Speaker, the last 7 years, we have been only talking about gender balance. And I think it was important for our sisters also to be included. And I think it's all about interest. To me, gender balance was important because every single group, every single community, or even gender, has their own interests, and they know themselves better. For example, for women have their special role in this country, and all over the world, they have a special role, and they know it better. For example, in issues, the activities they do are different from what men do. So they would like to get a position where their voices are heard, and where they can make decisions for those particular activities that matter to them. So it was important for them.
Honorable member for Samburu, this bill is about representation.
Yeah, I'm talking about. I'm coming there, Madam Speaker. So the issue of representation is that even if it is representation, it is about voices. Somebody has to be put in a place to be active, representing certain groups, so that they can make decisions on behalf of those. So this bill, I support it because, especially in terms of about representation of women and also youth. But there are also issues. We also talked about marginalized groups that are there also. This country is divided in various categories. There are areas which there are people like El Chamus. There are people who are called also El Molo, or Kiek. They have never been represented in this in decision-making positions. They are represented by other people. So, and there are also communities which are living in accessible places. So they are also not represented. And other Kenyans, actually, sometimes if you look at the pastoralist communities that live in northern Kenya, so even though we are represented in the parliament and also in
in the counties, but we still have a lot of issues that are not managed through political representation because of the nature of those communities. For example, areas like Samburu, areas like Marsabit, Isiolo, Northeastern, although we have representation, but other Kenyans do not really understand us well. So we would like to be represented more, to be focused more. For example, the Kenya government brought, because of that lack of representation and lack of our voices to be heard, they brought something called the equalization fund, because they were neglected by the previous government, especially the colonial government, who were neglected, and most of our counties were closed. So even during the Legiko, the first presidential political arrangement in this country, those counties were not really focused so much. So they never benefited from representation as well as also resources of this country. Even because of population also, some people are not counted well just because their voices are not heard. And also the issue of perception, that people are considered as, those are just people who are there for the sake of being there. They can even kill themselves, they can even do cattle rustling, they can raid among themselves. It's their culture. So that particular, so if you have proper representation, surely those people can explain themselves better. Those groups that are mentioned in the Constitution. I was worried the other day when this issue of this bill of Punguza Mzigo was brought up. That would have even marginalized us more. If you say that one member of the National Assembly will represent the entire of maybe Marsabit or Samburu, one woman and one man, then we'll go back to where we were before. So that it is good that it's dying, because it would have actually marginalized in terms of representation more than we are at the moment. Also culture. Our cultures are diverse, and we need representation because to explain that kind of culture, to be able to fit within the other part of the country. It's even the issue of terrain, because certain areas cannot be reached. You cannot reach many places in this country are not accessible, and because again, if the representation is there, it can also help people to be known in this country, so that they can be able to represent their people well. Youth are, although they are youth, of course, who have been identified as in parliaments, in National Assembly, in the Senate, but the population of youth is so big in this country. It is so huge. So this bill should focus also on how can we turn around and ensure that youth will be in representation more than any other, because the population is higher than the other age sets in this country. So with those remarks, Madam Speaker, I support this bill, and when it comes for third reading, we'll be able to scrutinize more and also make amendments as necessary. Thank you so much.
Very well. The member for Samburu East. Let me have the member for Kiambu County, Honorable Wamuchomba Gathoni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Indeed, I have waited to give my weight to these amendments through this bill. And I want to congratulate the committee, through the chair who is present, for the efforts to fill up the gaps that they identified through the amendments that they have proposed, which are quite weighty and are deemed to bring a lot of change to the way we handle the political processes, touching on the special groups of Kenya. As a woman, I must confess that the weight of political violence and use of derogative language during political competitions in this country against women, it's something that we cannot ignore. I personally, I think I'm a victim, and I must confess, it's not a good feeling. And because some of us are known to have or to wear a thicker skin when it comes to some of these processes, it is our duty to make sure that we protect those that are weaker and are known to give in to the language and the violence that is melted on women, especially during political competitions. Madam Speaker, as I support the amendments, I would want to note that I will be more keen to get to know how this bill is going to protect women politicians, especially even when they are elected. Because it's not about when there is political competition, but even when they are elected. Recently, Madam Speaker, we have witnessed members of parliament using very vulgar language against women who are elected and who have political space in leadership. And we all look at the courts, waiting for the court to protect the women. If you look at even our social media platforms in this country, look at the kind of language that is being passed using those platforms, especially about women who are in politics and political leadership and spaces. I would be very much interested to know how this bill and these amendments can actually cushion women who are already in politics against such kind of attacks. I come from a background or a region where women's space is mostly equated to the kitchen, equated to the household, and is not expected to overflow to the political leadership. In fact, in my backyard, a woman never arrives. The woman is always on the move. Where she's born, she does not belong there culturally. Where she's married, she does not belong there culturally. And in fact, there are a lot of proverbs that we use to actually insinuate that a woman never arrives. Women are victims of what I call infantilization. I mean, women are always graded to the grade of where the children are, the infants are. And we are very common, or we hear so oftenly, women being referred to the infants in the way we categorize them. For example, when you talk about special groups, we say it is women and children. Why don't we say men and children? Women are grouped even when we have, for example, political activities like food rationing, when we are sharing food in the villages. We group women and children together. That is called infantilization. I am privy to this kind of information because, Madam Speaker, you allow me, in as much as people don't think that politicians are scholars, I am currently a scholar and I'm pursuing my PhD on women issues. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, we need to speak out on what is happening on the spaces of women, not only in the political field, but also in our cultural setting. Women are victims of what I call objectification. Women are given value on the basis of how many cows were paid for her dowry, on the basis of how many goats are going to be paid for her dowry in future. And when they get into the homesteads of their husbands, they are viewed as objects based on the price that was paid. And therefore, their space even in politics is viewed through the same lenses. And their space for political activations is limited. Madam Speaker, as I support this bill, I would want to urge the House, and especially when it comes to the second and the third reading, that we allow the bill to give space to how we protect those that are already coming out in politics from what I had mentioned on the onset of my contribution. In as much as we say that women are part of the special interest group, as a scholar, I would want to say something that is a little bit controversial, but it is the truth. Women are the majority when it comes to Kenyan's population, but it is not convincing enough, even with the many women we have in Kenya, why they do not occupy the many political leadership slots in Kenya. That is a problem without name. Historically, we had a woman who was a feminist scholar called Betty Friedan, who wrote a very popular book known as The Problem Without Name. This was during the suffrage, the women's suffrage movement in the United Kingdoms and United States of America. She said women were many, provided labor in the plantations and upcoming industries, but were not even able to vote then. She started off a movement that gave women the right to vote. In Kenya, we have so many women in our backyards. In fact, they are majority of the population, but they have not been able to achieve the political space threshold that we would expect them to do. To me, we still cannot be able to identify one single problem that makes women not occupy the spaces. And therefore, I still say is a problem that we have still not been able to identify the name. Madam Speaker, please allow me to ask the chair of this committee that has done this work to try and give women more cushion, especially when it comes to the names and the branding that we give our women in political leadership. Like I said, I'm a victim. Women are not supposed to know anything in politics, and this is a cultural lens that women have been given. And when you speak loud and boldly, like some of us do, we are called names. Personally, I'm a victim. I don't shy away from saying what I know, what I believe in. With the backlash that I get sometimes, I am ready for it because I know if I don't do it, there are other women who have aspired to become what I have become with my little achievements, but they are kept off because of what attacks, the kind of attacks that we are receiving. With those very many remarks, Madam Speaker, please allow me to support and congratulate the team for the wonderful and amazing work they have done. Thank you.
Very moving. Women are always moving. They don't arrive. Is that what you say? Chairman, I don't know you address that, but it's a house of debate. The member for Madare, Honorable Oluoch.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to lend my support to this bill.
Are you on mic?
Yes, I am on the mic.
Okay. Now we can hear you.
I was saying thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to lend my support to this very crucial bill. I am a member of this committee, and I sat here very patiently to listen to some of the issues that have been raised. And as I make my contribution, allow me to begin by trying to respond or disabuse some of the notions that have been advanced in opposition to this bill. I listened to the Member of Parliament for Rarieda Otiende Amolo, and this concern, I think, has been repeated, said in different ways by Honorable Kamket about the possibility of over-legislating in respect to women, particularly in respect to Otiende Amolo. He raised the issue about the possibility of this bill flying against the provisions of Article 27 of the Constitution, sub-Article 4, and in particular, the possibility that we could be discriminating other persons in the process of trying to legislate to provide or make special dispensation for certain groups. I think I also heard him to be saying that in respect of Article 38 of the Constitution, this would disenfranchise voters in respect of the ability to choose persons of their choice. However, I wanted to begin by saying that it is the duty of CIOC, and if you read sections 4 and 5 of the 6th schedule, one of the roles of CIOC was to be able to consider and to look at the problematic aspects of implementation of this constitution. And listening to the debate, I think we will all agree that we inherited a very good constitution, but with a lot of problematic, if not contradictory, provisions. You look at Article 27 of the Constitution, on the one hand, it will be telling you that you cannot discriminate persons on the grounds that are set therein. Age relates to youth. The question of gender will relate to women. The questions of persons of ethnic and other minorities will relate to the persons of SIDs that we are speaking to. You go to Article 54, it will be speaking to the questions of persons with disabilities, and particularly at subclause 4, thereon, it actually sets a certain threshold and says 5% of that has to be allocated to persons with disabilities. But I want to restrict myself in respect of this first concern to the issue about the gender question. And I want to agree with the members who have said that the bill under Article 100 is not about women. It is not a gender bill. This bill is about representation of the categories of people that have been placed in that specific category. And in respect of that, I also want to respond also to the persons who are saying that we are over-legislating in respect of women. And I think Dr. Nyikal it is who said that we did not have to mention the women because women are already under Article 81B and other provisions. And the responsible response that I have to that is this, that we are effecting legislation to put into effect Article 100, which specifically highlights the names of the persons or categories that are under that category. Women happen to be one of those. I also want to bring to our attention that in respect of this issue of women, and notwithstanding the fact that I have said that this bill is not about women, but let's just consider that provision for a moment. The 11th Parliament attempted to do 2 pieces of legislation to put into place the 2/3 gender rule, and we failed. The 12th Parliament recently, I think in the second session, we attempted to do this, and we failed. Now, the question arises, and I'm going back to the concerns about Otiende Amolo, that we may need to bite the bullet and go back to the Constitution itself and confront the questions and the contradictions that are there. But I want to bring to the attention of the House that as we wait to confront that which is in the Constitution in terms of contradiction, remember that we have tried a constitutional amendment in respect of the 2/3 gender rule that was brought about by the majority leader. And you need to raise 2/3 in order to meet that threshold. So the questions that this House has to deal with against a petition and a possible writ by the Chief Justice for the dissolution is this House, is that should we wait? And Article 100 provided us with the opportunity to be able to deal, as we deal with other minorities and other categories in that provision, also to be able to sanitize and deal with the question and the deficit on the issue of the 2/3 gender rule. I also wanted to deal with the concern that has been raised here on the issue of access to media. And let me admit that there may be discussions that we may need to have a debate as to the extent to which we want to cover the question of women. That concern has been raised here. Specifically, it has been raised in the context of, are all women so marginalized or in that category of special cases that they need to be covered under this? And I want to say that's a debate that we can have. We can talk about either tightening this, we can talk about putting in place regulations so that this is not just an open carte blanche that may allow women to sit back and wait for the opportunity to be covered under the special interest groups. So that is a discussion that we are open to. It may be dealt with either by way of regulations or some amendments, I think, at the 3rd reading. I think there have been concerns about financing, and again, I want to say this is a debate that we can have, but I think when you're talking about lifting people who have been marginalized, people who have been left behind for certain historical reasons, one of the ways in which you're able to encourage these people to participate and to be able to sit in the same place in terms of representation one of the ways that was open to us was to use the question of election financing. And you will see that we have extended that argument in respect of the political parties, so that political parties that encourage the representation of women, that may help us to draw closer to the 2/3 gender rule or to fill that gap, are then able to share a certain percentage in terms of the political parties' funding. There may be need for us to tighten the question as to whether money should specifically be directed to pay them, because that may be abused, but you cannot rule out and throw away the fact that that incentive to political parties and that need to uplift the women who are actually in that special interest category in terms of financing is something that we need to completely embrace. There is the issue about access to media. And again, this is something that has raised problems in terms of how do you deal with an opponent of yours that has been exposed to media to your disadvantage. And again, those are things that you can be able to qualify in terms of who exactly would be entitled to this access to media, what extent of the access to media, at what point will that now become a disadvantage to the other members who are also participating in the elections. Having said that, then, I wanted to make a few comments in respect of what the bill has tried to do. And Madam Speaker, the Persons with Disabilities Act is one of the acts that it proposes, and among other acts that it proposes to deal with. And in this particular, it may interest us to know that it is seeking to make amendments to the Persons of Disabilities Act, so that the persons of disabilities are also considered to be one of those persons that are supposed to be considered in terms of Article 100 of the Constitution, and it seeks to promote their inclusion of these persons with disability in decision making. One of the other things that this bill seeks to do in terms of persons with disabilities, which is an obligation to the IEBC in terms of the Elections Act, is to ensure that the Elections Act, in terms of the voter register, is able to have disaggregated data that will be able to help in planning for the elections, for nominations, for activities and functions that are able to bring up the persons of disability up to speed in terms of the ability to compete. I think also
the Honorable Member for Anai Naboy. Honorable Chiput. Just give him the mic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to be very brief. This is a great amendment. The Representation of Special Interests Groups Laws Amendment Bill. Anyway, in the spirit of this amendment bill, I want the deficits and sanities be addressed. At the same time, I want us to seek progressive laws. In the spirit of Article 100, more particularly the youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic and minorities and marginalized communities. Marginalized communities are like the Sengwer in Elgeyo Marakwet County, the Ogiek in Nakuru, and El Njomus in Baringo, just but to mention a few. Anyway, all I want to say is that youth who constitute 70% of the total population of this country must be taken into consideration when it comes to laws. Recently, in my own constituency, the great athlete Eliud Kipchoge trains in Chirchir Center, Kaptagat, Ainapoi constituency. As much as he resides in Nandi, he trains in my own constituency. Being a youth, and I brought a motion in Parliament that those athletes who bring glory, honor, recognition to our own country must be rewarded and must be remunerated. Having said that, Kipchoge is a great man, just but to mention a few. When it comes to rewarding them, they've been rewarding them as ambassadors and so on and so forth. But I want Kenya to make history by nominating him as a member of parliament. Yes, it is true.
It's part of the specialized group.
Specialized.
Special interest group.
Madam Speaker, you are a great person. They have talked about political parties, funding, and so on and so forth. They have talked about women. Women constitute 52%, just but to mention, 52% of the total population of this country, whereas men, we constitute 48%. I've listened very carefully. All I want, and it is all about globalization. It is all about civility. It's all about civilization. There is no violence. I don't agree because the operational arm of government and the long arm of government are there to protect us by the Constitution. We as members of parliament, we respect and we uphold the supremacy of our constitutional institutions and its constitutional institutions. Therefore, when it comes to finances, I want not that two big parties be given the money. We want fairness. We want equality in distribution of wealth. And again, Madam Speaker, through the chair, I want progressive tax regime be enhanced so that the very poor can come up. Yes, it is true. I want those who have a lot must be given enough, they must pay a lot so that the government can move forward. Anyway, having said that, I personally, I subscribe to unity in diversity. We love women because women are great people in the world. All of us, even presidents, everybody, women, we cherish, we value you, and we respect you. So the issue of you crying, saying that we've been, what is it all about? We respect you. We honor you. You are the ones who, even Eliud was born by a woman. So I just wanted to say that women are great leaders. We respect you. And we want competitive, when we are competing for seats, Honorable Harris, we want fairness and anyway, I finished. I stand to support the amendment.
Honorable.
Speaker, the time is over, but I was raising an intervention to the he mentioned that women are crying, and I don't know what he means that women are crying, and whether, Madam Speaker, he has forgotten that the chair, this moment, the speaker is a woman, and that his statement is actually demeaning, and I wanted to ask that he withdraws that.
Thank you, Honorable Ome.
I know the speaker has no gender, but we must recognize, Madam Speaker, yes.
Very well. Honorable Ome, you are right, but at the point of interjection, you know the member had already completed but you said it, you intended to. Let me have the member for Wajir. Wajir South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do appreciate that I've got the time to support this report. I support this report. Our constitution is clear and wholesome, and therefore Article 100 of the constitution requires Parliament to enter legislation or enact legislations that promotes the representation in Parliament of minority groups, in particular people with disabilities, the youth, the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities, as well as women. And therefore, given that that article is already in provision, in 2015, since 2000, it is way overdue that in 2015 was the expected date, that is within the 5 years, that this report would have come, and that legislation would have been in place and has worked on. Definitely, what we find, given that I have got a very short time to speak on this, ethnic minorities will be considered in our constitution, and therefore the 11th Parliament, through the political parties amendment.
Very well, Honorable Member for Wajir South. We will have the bill resume the next sitting, as it will be slotted on order paper, and you will have 9 minutes to debate on the same, so you plan for that. Allow me to appreciate the chairman. The chairman has been here since 2:30, taking notes. Chairman, we thank you for that. Honorable Wahome, you are still, I can see your intention request to speak, only that we are guided by procedures. It is true that we have a member for Laisamis who's ready to speak to this, the member for Central Umendi, Honorable Wahome, as she did say, member for Kandara. But since this is a house of procedure, remembers the debate on the representation of special interest groups laws, Amendment Bill number, National Assembly Bill number 52 of 2019 will continue. You can plan for this. And the time being 7:01 p.m., this house stands adjourned till tomorrow, Thursday, October 17, 2019 at 2:30 p.m. I thank you all.